My parents wanted to force me to pay off my brother's $150,000 gambling debt because you have no kids, you owe us. But when my brother mocked me and said, "You'll always be our little bank," I cashed out in a way they never expected. I'm in my 40s, no kids, and I've worked hard for everything I have. Recently, my parents asked me to pay off my brother's $150,000 gambling debt. When I refused, they guilt-tripped me, but it was my brother's words, "You'll always be our little bank," that pushed me over the edge. I decided to make some changes that none of them saw coming, and it's honestly been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Here's what happened. I've always been the responsible one in the family. Not the favorite, not the troublemaker, just the one who did what was expected. My brother, Scott, on the other hand, was the golden child. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was fine with it for the most part, even if it felt like they put way too much pressure on me to be the one to clean up after him. But things got complicated when Scott's gambling addiction spiraled out of control. I'm Meredith, by the way. I'm 42, and I've spent most of my life trying to build something for myself. I run a small marketing consultancy in Asheville, North Carolina, and while my career has been successful, my personal life has always felt a bit lonely. No kids, no partner, and honestly, I've always kept to myself more than most people would expect. But that didn't stop my family from constantly reminding me that I was lucky because I had more flexibility than Scott, who had 2 kids and a wife. They used that as an excuse to keep piling on more expectations. It wasn't until Scott's gambling debts came to light that the real strain started. I didn't know the full extent of it until my parents called me one evening. They asked me to come over to talk, but when I arrived, I immediately felt the tension. My father was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. My mother, always the more composed one, was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at me with an intensity one wasn't used to. And Scott, well, he was slouched on the couch, not even looking me in the eye. "You've been doing well for yourself, Meredith," my father started, trying to make the words sound casual. "We've been thinking about what you can do to help the family." I could already feel the weight of whatever he was going to ask. "Scott," my mother added, "he's gotten into some deep trouble. He owes a lot of money." I glanced at Scott. He looked almost ashamed, but there was something about the way he avoided my gaze that told me he wasn't as sorry as he should have been. "How much?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. $150,000, Scott said quietly. "To some pretty dangerous people." I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't the first time Scott had been in financial trouble, but this was different. This was serious. "We need you to help us, Meredith," my mother said, her voice more pleading than I had ever heard it. "You're our only hope. You don't have kids, you don't have the same responsibilities as Scott does. You can help him pay this off." I was stunned. I just stared at her, trying to process what she was asking. "I'm sorry, what?" I finally managed to say. "You have the means," my father interjected, crossing his arms. "You owe it to this family. We've supported you all these years, and now it's time for you to step up. Scott needs you." I couldn't believe it. They were asking me to pay off his debt? To clean up a mess that had nothing to do with me? I wasn't even married, I didn't have kids, and I sure as hell didn't ask for any of this. "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't my responsibility. He made these choices." But my parents weren't backing down. They tried to guilt-trip me, telling me how I owed it to them, how they had always been there for me, how I was the only one who could help. The more they pressed, the angrier I became. Scott didn't say much. He just sat there, letting them do the talking. But I could see the smugness in his eyes. It was the same look he had whenever he knew he could manipulate people into getting what he wanted. The conversation went in circles for a while, with my parents trying every angle, using every emotional argument they could think of to make me feel guilty. But I stood my ground. I refused. That was until Scott texted me later that night. "You'll always be our little bank. You know you'll cave eventually. You always do." I stared at the message for a long time. Something about those words, about how he had reduced me to nothing more than a tool for his convenience, pushed me over the edge. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. I spent the next few days thinking about everything, about how my entire life, my entire family dynamic, had been built on this idea that I was supposed to give and give and give without ever asking for anything in return. How they had always expected me to bail Scott out of whatever mess he'd created. And this time I wasn't going to do it. Not just for my own sake, but because I finally realized that they didn't see me as a person anymore. They only saw me as an obligation, a safety net, a bank for their son. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to pay off Scott's debt, but I was going to do something else that would make the consequences of his actions hit him where it hurt the most. I wasn't going to wait around for them to call me again. I was going to take control of my life in a way they wouldn't see coming. I called a lawyer the next day and started taking steps to protect myself. I knew they'd come after me again, maybe even try something underhanded, so I took every precaution. I moved my savings into a new bank account that they wouldn't be able to trace. I started the paperwork to sell my house, which they had always known about. But that wasn't enough. I also started looking for a new place to live, something private, something they couldn't track. The final move came when I wrote them a letter. A letter that would change everything. It was simple. It laid out my terms. I was no longer part of their plans. I was done. And if they kept trying to contact me, I would take legal action. I was ready to go to court if that's what it took. I didn't just want to protect myself financially. I wanted to protect myself emotionally too. I had spent too many years letting them use me as a fallback. It was time for that to stop. I sent the letter via certified mail and waited. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fallout. I wasn't scared of what would happen next. And when the phone calls started coming in, one after the other, all filled with anger and desperation, I didn't answer. The phone calls kept coming. Every few hours, my phone would buzz with another call from my parents. I didn't answer any of them. My voicemail inbox filled up quickly with messages. My mother was crying, begging me to reconsider. My father, never one to show weakness, sounded more frustrated than I had ever heard him. "Meredith, you can't be this selfish. This is your brother. Your family. We've given you everything, and now you're turning your back on us when we need you the most." My father's voice was tight with anger, but I could hear the desperation behind it. He was trying to guilt me, trying to make me feel like the bad guy for protecting myself. But the more they called, the more resolute I became. I had spent my entire life making sacrifices for them, always putting my own needs and desires aside because it was expected of me. But this time I wasn't going to bend. This time I was finally choosing me. Still, it wasn't easy. As the days went by, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt each time I saw the missed calls. I'd always been close with my parents, and part of me missed the idea of family, the kind I thought we had, at least. But the reality was that they had never seen me as an individual. I was just an extension of them. Something to be used when convenient. The fact that they were demanding I pay off Scott's debts without a second thought made it clear to me, they didn't respect me. They didn't love me in the way a family should. I didn't hear from Scott for a while, and I wasn't surprised. I knew how he worked. He'd always been a master manipulator, and now that he was in the hole, it was only a matter of time before he would start blaming everyone else but himself. That's exactly what he did when he finally reached out. It was a text. Simple. Direct. "You're a disgrace, Meredith. You're no better than the people who judge me. You've abandoned me, and you'll regret it. I didn't even bother responding. I'd made up my mind. There was no way I was going to let him twist things around. He had chosen this path. I had done nothing to force him into gambling, and I sure as hell wasn't going to take on the responsibility of fixing his mess. But it didn't end there. The next step came when my mother showed up at my office unannounced. She was waiting for me in the parking lot when I pulled into the lot one afternoon. I didn't see her at first. She was standing by her car, arms crossed, looking like a woman with something to prove. I sighed as I walked toward her. I could already feel the weight of this conversation. This wasn't just a chat anymore. This was going to be a confrontation, and I had no idea how it would end. "Meredith," she started, her voice soft, like she was trying to approach me with caution, but there was a bite to it. "I understand you're upset, but we need to talk about this." "Mom, there's nothing to talk about," I replied, trying to stay calm. I was done with the back and forth. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for doing what was best for me. "I'm not paying off Scott's debt." Her face reddened, and she took a step forward. "You don't understand. He's in real trouble, Meredith. He's going to lose everything. He's got kids, a family. How can you just walk away from that?" "Because I'm not the one who caused it, Mom." I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice anymore. "Scott did this. He is the one who gambled it all away. I'm not his backup anymore. I can't be that for him." She shook her head slowly, her lips trembling. "I thought you were better than this. We raised you to be part of this family. This is what family does. We help each other." Her words stung, but they also made something click in my mind. This wasn't just about Scott. This was about me being expected to sacrifice my life and happiness for the sake of their image of family. They saw me as nothing more than an extension of them, something to be used when it suited them. And for years, I had gone along with it. But not anymore. I looked my mother in the eye, feeling stronger than I ever had before. "I'm sorry, Mom. But I'm not doing this. Not for Scott, not for you, not for anyone. I've spent my life being the responsible one, taking care of everything, and I'm done." She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there staring at me. Then, with a resigned sigh, she turned and got back into her car without another word. I watched her drive away, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but I knew there would be more to come. The fallout wasn't over. They would try again. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The next few days were a blur. The call stopped for a little while, but I knew it wouldn't last. When you've been the go-to person for so long, people don't just stop coming to you when they need help. I wasn't naive. I knew they would come back to try and break me down again. And sure enough, they did. But it wasn't through a call or a message this time. One afternoon, I came home to find a package waiting for me on my doorstep. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, and it had no return address. I felt a little uneasy as I picked it up, wondering what it could be. Inside was a stack of papers, some official-looking, some less so. At the top was a letter in Scott's handwriting. I could feel my heart rate spike as I opened it. The letter was simple, almost childish in tone. "I'm sorry for everything, Meredith. I know I messed up, and I know you won't help me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to fix things. I don't expect you to bail me out, but I hope you'll understand that I had no choice. I had to do what I did. Please don't cut me off completely." I stared at the letter, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to name. There was a part of me that still wanted to believe in the family I thought we had, but that part was shrinking with every day that passed. I couldn't just pretend anymore. What did this really mean for me? Where was the line between helping a family member and enabling them? I had a choice. I always had a choice. and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make it. The letter sat on my coffee table for a few days. I didn't respond right away. Part of me still wanted to believe that Scott was genuinely sorry for what he had done. Maybe if I looked at it from his perspective, I could see how easy it was for him to fall into the hole of gambling and addiction. But then, I thought about everything that led me to this point. The years of being the one to pick up the pieces, the constant emotional manipulation, the years of sacrifices that were never appreciated. No. There was no way I was going to let him pull me back in again. After reading the letter over and over, I finally made a decision. It wasn't about giving Scott a chance to redeem himself. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about self-preservation. I didn't respond to the letter, but I did something else, something that would send a very clear message to my entire family. I called a lawyer. I had been hesitant at first. I didn't want to escalate things further, but I needed to protect myself. I'd already moved my assets to a new account, and I had taken every precaution to shield my financial security. But I wanted to make sure there was no way anyone could come after me again. My lawyer helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter, warning my parents and Scott that if they continued to contact me or attempt to harass me for money, legal action would be taken. I wasn't going to leave any room for misinterpretation. The letter was clear, no more. Once it was ready, I mailed it directly to my parents' house, to Scott's last known address, and to my lawyer's office to have it officially documented. I wanted to make sure there was no question about my intentions. It wasn't about getting back at them for what they'd done. It wasn't even about the money. This was about taking control of my life for the first time, and making it clear that I would never again be a pawn in their game. A week passed. The call started up again. But this time, they were different. They were more frantic. More panicked. It was my mother, calling from an unknown number. I could hear the tears in her voice even before she spoke. "Meredith, please. This has gone too far. Your father and we never meant for you to feel like this. We were wrong to ask you to pay Scott's debt, but we didn't know what else to do. He's in such deep trouble. He's been trying to fix it, and we don't know where to turn." Her words sounded like a broken record, but this time, I didn't feel the slightest bit guilty. I wasn't moved by her tears or the pleading in her voice. I had already made my peace with everything that had happened. "Mom," I said firmly, "I've already told you everything I need to say. Scott is an adult. He has to take responsibility for his own actions. I can't keep doing this. And frankly, I won't. Please, Meredith," she whimpered, "we don't have anyone else to turn to. If you just give us a little more time, maybe we can figure something out. I'm sorry, but I'm not helping him. Not anymore." I paused. "I've already sent you the letter. If you keep harassing me, I will take legal action." "I mean it." I could hear her sniffling, but I stayed calm. I hung up the phone without another word. Over the next couple of weeks, things got even more tense. There were no more phone calls from my parents, but I could feel the pressure mounting. I knew that they were speaking to other family members, trying to rally support, trying to convince everyone that I was being cruel for not helping Scott. I could imagine the stories they were telling, how Meredith had always been selfish. How she was turning her back on family. How she'd always been the responsible one but couldn't even do this one thing to help her brother. But the more I thought about it, the clearer everything became. They weren't just angry at me for not helping Scott, they were angry because I had set boundaries. I had refused to play their game anymore. And that, I realized, was the real issue. Scott tried to call me once, a few weeks later. I didn't answer. The next day, I found a message waiting for me on my voicemail. "I know you're ignoring me, Meredith. But you need to understand something. If you really care about this family, you'll come through. I'll never forget this. I didn't call him back, and I didn't feel an ounce of regret. Instead, I felt something that surprised me: relief. A month later, I received a letter from my parents. It was the first time they had communicated with me in writing since I had sent the cease and desist letter. This time, it wasn't an emotional plea or a threat. It was cold. Businesslike. Meredith, we are sorry for the strain this situation has caused. We respect your decision to cut ties with us. Your father and I have discussed it, and we have decided to make it clear to everyone that your decision was yours and yours alone. We hope that you will reconsider in time. Love. Mom and Dad. I read the letter over and over. There was something almost clinical about it, like they had gone through the motions of offering an apology without actually feeling it. But I didn't care. In fact, I almost laughed. It was the first time I had ever seen them take any responsibility for anything. That night, I took a deep breath and moved on with my life. I felt lighter, free in a way I hadn't in years. Scott's life continued to spiral. Without the money from me, without the safety net he'd always taken for granted, he was forced to face the consequences of his actions. He lost his house. His marriage began to falter. His reputation took a hit. And yet, he never really learned. He never took full responsibility for what he had done. I stayed out of it. I didn't reach out, I didn't try to fix it. And you know what? He never asked for my help again. The months went by, and I found myself more content than I had ever been. My relationships with friends grew stronger, and I even began dating again. I traveled more. I painted. I took long walks in the mountains, free from the weight of obligation and guilt that had followed me for so long. I still think about my family sometimes. I wonder how they're doing. But deep down, I know I did the right thing. And as for Scott? I've let go of the idea that I could save him. The truth is, he never wanted to be saved.